The jet screamed across the sky before it hit the water. Metal tearing, glass shattering, the sound of something final. Brett Callahan was 30 feet from shore when it happened, his son's fishing line still tangled in his hands. He didn't hesitate, didn't think. He dove into water so cold it burned his lungs, dragging a woman in a designer suit from a cockpit filling with lake water. Vivian Cross, Billionaire CEO, alive because of him. What Brett didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that saving her life would rip open the one thing he'd spent a decade burying. The men he'd betrayed weren't dead. The blood on his hands wasn't washed clean. And 6 days after the cameras stopped rolling, after Vivian plastered his face across every news channel searching for her hero, his son vanished from their driveway. The ransom note was written in a handwriting Brett recognized, a ghost he thought he'd killed. What happens when one act of courage destroys everything a man has built to forget? The morning started quiet at Clearwater Lake, Montana. Brett Callahan sat in his fishing boat, watching his 8-year-old son Wyatt thread a worm onto a hook. 3 years since cancer took Wyatt's mother. 3 years of Brett trying to be enough parent for two while hiding from a past that could destroy them both. He'd walked away from 6-figure mercenary contracts to become a carpenter in the middle of nowhere. This silence was why he'd come here 10 years ago. "Dad, is this right?" Wyatt held up the hook, worm dangling crooked. Brett adjusted the knot with hands that moved on instinct. Muscle memory from a life Wyatt knew nothing about. "That'll work." "Cast it out near those reeds." Wyatt cast his line with a satisfied splash, grinning. Brett felt something crack inside him. He loved this kid enough to have buried Brett Callahan the operator and become Brett Callahan the carpenter who minded his own business. The sound came from nowhere, a mechanical scream cutting through the mountain quiet. Brett's head snapped up, every nerve firing. Training he'd spent years forgetting surged back instantly. A private jet spiraled through the air half a mile up, one engine smoking, the other on fire. His brain calculated angles before he realized he was doing it. The jet hit the water 300 yards away. Impact sent up a geyser that hung in the air like a frozen scream. Brett grabbed Wyatt's shoulders, looked him dead in the eye. "Stay in the boat. Call 911. Do not leave this boat." He stripped off his jacket, kicked off his boots, and dove in. The water hit like a fist, but he didn't stop swimming. Someone was dying in that cockpit, and Brett Callahan had killed enough people. Maybe saving one would balance the scales. The distance closed in brutal strokes. The jet was half submerged, cockpit windows spiderwebbed. Brett dove under, saw her through fractured glass. A woman in her 40s, dark hair floating, blood on her forehead. Not moving. Door handle jammed. He surfaced, sucked air, dove again. This time he used his elbow, drove it into the glass. Pain exploded, but the window gave. He grabbed her, kicked toward surface. They broke into air together. Brett held her head up, started swimming one-armed toward shore. His muscles were concrete, his vision tunneled. Then gravel under his knees and Wyatt calling his name. Brett dragged her onto the beach, started chest compressions, counting. 30, 29, 28. She coughed. Water poured from her mouth and she gasped. Her eyes opened, sharp green, scanning his face. "You saved my life." Her voice carried authority that made Brett's stomach drop. He saw the expensive suit, diamond earrings, Patek Philippe watch. This was money. Real money. The kind that came with questions he couldn't afford to answer. Paramedics ran down the beach. Behind them, news vans rolled up, cameras swinging. Brett's blood went cold. Cameras meant exposure. Men who thought he was dead might start wondering. He grabbed Wyatt, pulled him into the boat, fired up the outboard. Someone lifted a camera phone. Brett opened the throttle. He'd saved a life and painted a target on his back. The story hit news within an hour. The woman was Vivian Cross, CEO of Cross Industries, worth $40 billion. She gave interviews from her hospital bed. I owe my life to a man whose name I don't even know. If he's watching this, I need him to come forward. I need to thank him properly. Properly. Brett knew what that meant. Money, publicity, questions he couldn't answer. Wyatt was asleep upstairs after asking 20 times if he was okay. How do you tell an 8-year-old his father used to kill people for money? The knock came 3 days later. Brett saw a black SUV. His hand moved to the Glock. Vivian Cross stepped out, no bodyguards, head bandaged, eyes determined. Brett opened the door. You shouldn't be here, she smiled. You're a hard man to find. Took 3 private investigators. Brett's voice came hard. I don't want money. I want you to leave and forget you found me. She studied him. You're not afraid of me. You're afraid of what me being here means. What are you running from? She pulled out a business card. My private number. If you ever need anything, you call. When the day comes that you need help, and that day always comes, you have someone who owes you. Fair trade? She walked to her SUV and drove away. Brett stared at the card, then tucked it into his wallet behind his dead wife's picture, just in case. That night, his phone buzzed. Vivian's voice came urgent. Turn on the news. CNN, now. The headline made his blood stop. Mystery hero identified. Billionaire's savior has dark past. His face filled the screen. Questions about where he'd been for the past decade. Questions. That word would kill him. They didn't know yet about Aegis Group, about contracts in Libya and Syria, about things he'd done in the dark. But they would. Somewhere out there, Garrett Voss was watching. Voss, who'd built Aegis Group into a private army operating in shadows. Voss, who'd given Brett a direct order to execute a village elder. Voss, who'd watched while Brett lowered his rifle, let the old man live, and took the evidence files instead. Brett had betrayed the organization, stolen documentation, and disappeared with a newborn son. He'd been dead to them until tonight. He was halfway to his bedroom when he heard it. A car engine coming up the mountain road at 2 a.m. A black sedan stopped at his driveway, headlights off. Brett grabbed the Glock, positioned himself where he had clear sight to the door and Wyatt's room behind him. His heart hammered, but his hands were steady. The man knocked 3 slow raps. Brett Callahan. The voice was smooth, friendly, exactly the one Brett had feared. Garrett Voss. I know you're in there. I know your son's upstairs. You have 60 seconds before every asset Aegis has knows where you live. Open the door, Brett. Voss was alone. That meant he wasn't here to execute. This was something else. Brett opened it. Voss stood smiling. You look good. Boy's name is Wyatt. 8 years old. Smart kid. You did a good job raising him alone. Brett's jaw tightened. If you touch him, Voss's smile vanished, replaced by something colder. I'm offering you a choice. You still have the files. The ones you stole 10 years ago. Names, dates, mission logs. Everything that would turn Aegis into a congressional inquiry and me into a prisoner. I want them back. In exchange, I'll walk away. Your son grows up safe. You build your decks. We pretend the last decade never happened. Brett's voice came hard. And if I refuse? Voss pulled out a phone, held it up. A photo of Wyatt's school, time-stamped 2 hours ago. I know where he goes, when he goes, who picks him up, everything. You have 72 hours to deliver those files to a location I'll text you. If you don't, your son disappears. Not permanently, just long enough to convince you I'm serious. Maybe he comes back missing a finger. Maybe he doesn't come back at all. Your choice, Brett. 72 hours. Voss turned and walked back to his car, casual as Sunday morning. He paused at the driver's door, looked back. You were always the best operator I had. Shame you grew a conscience. Made you weak. The engine purred to life and the car rolled back down the mountain, disappearing into the dark. Brett stood on the porch, gun in hand, shaking with rage and terror. 72 hours. 3 days to figure out how to save his son from a ghost who'd just proven he'd never been dead at all. Brett didn't sleep. By sunrise, he'd made 3 decisions. He wasn't giving Voss the files. He wasn't running. He was calling Vivian Cross. He hated needing help, but Voss had made it clear. This wasn't a fight Brett could win alone. He dialed at 6 a.m. She picked up on the first ring. Callahan. The words tasted like ash. I need your help. Where are you? She asked. My cabin. The man who came here last night. He's dangerous in ways you can't imagine. So if you're smart, you hang up and forget you ever met me. Her response came without hesitation. I'm not smart. I'm stubborn. Stay there. I'm coming. She arrived at 9 driving an armored SUV, wearing tactical pants and a jacket that probably had Kevlar woven into it. She walked into his cabin, looked around at the sparse furniture and packed bags. Tell me everything. So Brett did. He told her about Aegis Group, about the missions in countries that didn't exist on any map, about the things they did to keep oil flowing and governments stable. He told her about the village elder, about stealing the files, about running for a decade with a target on his back. And he told her about Garrett Voss, about the threat, about the 72 hours that were now 61 hours and counting. Vivian listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You're not giving him the files, she said finally. It wasn't a question. No. If I do, he kills me and takes Wyatt anyway. Those files are the only leverage I have. Vivian pulled out her phone. Then we need a different plan. I have resources, security teams, legal firepower. Brett shook his head. He'll find us. Voss has contacts everywhere, intelligence agencies, criminal networks. Running just delays the inevitable. Vivian's eyes were sharp. Then what's your play? Brett looked at Wyatt, who was sitting on the couch playing a handheld game, oblivious to the adult conversation happening 10 feet away. I go after Voss first. Take the fight to him before he can take my son. Vivian's expression hardened. That's suicide. Maybe, Brett thought. But it's better than waiting for him to come here. I need you to take Wyatt. Keep him safe while I handle this. You've got security, resources, places Voss can't touch. Will you do that? Vivian studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll do better than that. I'll help you. This isn't your fight, Brett wanted to say. But Vivian leaned forward. You saved my life. I told you I owed you. This is how I pay that debt. I've spent 20 years building Cross Industries. You think I did that by being nice? I've gone to war with hedge funds, hostile takeovers, corporate espionage that would make your mercenary work look like child's play. I know how to fight dirty. And I know people. People who can help us. Brett needed her money, her connections, her willingness to step into the fire. Okay, but first thing. We get Wyatt somewhere safe. They moved fast. Vivian made calls, arranged for a security team to meet them at a private airstrip 2 hours away. Brett packed Wyatt into the SUV, buckled him in. The road wound down the mountain, and Brett kept checking the mirrors. They made the airstrip by noon, where a Gulfstream was waiting. 4 men in suits stood at the base of the stairs, ex-military, the kind of operators who knew how to kill quietly and efficiently. They're mine, Vivian said. Personal security. Best in the business. They'll take Wyatt to my estate in Napa. 24-hour protection. No one gets through them. Brett crouched down, looked Wyatt in the eye. You're going to go on an airplane with Miss Cross's friends. They're good guys. They're going to take you somewhere really safe, and I'm going to come get you as soon as I can. Okay?" Wyatt's eyes were wet. "You promise?" Brett pulled him into a hug, breathed in the smell of his son's shampoo, tried to memorize the feeling of those small arms around his neck. "I promise. I love you, kiddo. Don't forget that." Wyatt's voice cracked. "I love you too, Dad." Brett let go, watched one of the security guys gently take Wyatt's hand and lead him up the stairs. The boy looked back once, waved, and then he was gone, swallowed by the plane. The door closed. The engines roared. And Brett stood on the tarmac, watching the jet climb into the sky, praying he'd live long enough to see his son again. Vivian's hand touched his shoulder. "He'll be safe." Brett turned to her. "He better be. Because if Voss gets to him, I'll burn Aegis to the ground and everyone in it. Then let's make sure that doesn't happen." Vivian pulled out her phone. "I'm bringing in someone you need to meet. FBI, an old friend from Harvard who specializes in domestic terrorism. If Aegis is operating on U.S. soil, she can help us build a case. Get warrants. Turn this from a private war into a federal investigation." Brett's gut twisted. FBI means questions. Vivian's eyes were calculating. They'll want Voss more. You've got files that prove Aegis committed war crimes. That makes you a whistleblower, not a criminal. We play this right. You walk away clean. But we have to move fast. They spent the next 6 hours in a hotel conference room, laying out the plan. The FBI agent, a woman named Kendra Hall, mid-40s, with the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that said she'd seen the worst humanity had to offer, listened to Brett's story, asked pointed questions, and finally nodded. "You've got enough here to open an investigation. But opening an investigation takes time. Warrants, judges, bureaucracy. Time you don't have." "So what do?" Brett asked. "We force Voss's hand. Make him think you're delivering the files, then ambush him. Bring him in alive. Get him talking. Use his testimony to roll up the rest of Aegis." Kendra looked at Vivian. "You're going to need serious security for this." Vivian nodded. "I've got security." She looked at Brett. "What about the files?" Brett pulled a small flash drive from his pocket. "Right here, everything. Names, dates, mission logs, bank transfers, video footage from helmet cams. It's enough to put Voss and half his command staff away for life." Kendra reached for it, but Brett pulled it back. "Not yet. This is my insurance. Nobody gets it until my son is safe and Voss is in cuffs." "Fair enough," Kendra said. "Then here's the plan. When Voss texts the location, we set up surveillance. FBI hostage rescue team in position, ready to move. You go in wired, hand over a fake drive. When Voss realizes it's fake, we move in. Fast, clean, overwhelming force." Kendra's smile was cold. "And if he figures it out before you move in, then you better be a good liar, because if he smells a trap, he'll kill you and disappear. And your son becomes leverage." Brett's phone buzzed. Everyone went silent. He pulled it out, looked at the screen. A text from an unknown number. Pier 9. Warehouse, Seattle. Midnight tomorrow. Come alone. No cops, no backup, or the boy dies screaming. Brett showed the text to Kendra and Vivian. The agent swore softly. "That's aggressive. He's pushing the timeline." "Because he knows I'm not going to sit on my hands," Brett said. "He's forcing my move." "Then we force his." Kendra stood up. "I'll get HRT mobilized. Brett, you're going to walk in there tomorrow night, hand over the fake drive, and keep Voss talking long enough for us to get into position. Think you can do that?" Brett looked at the text again, at the words, "The boy dies screaming," and felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. "Yeah, I can do that." Vivian reached out, squeezed his hand. "You're not doing this alone." "The hell I'm not," Brett wanted to say, but Vivian's grip tightened. I told you I'm stubborn. I'm coming with you to Seattle. I'm going to be in that surveillance van watching. If something goes wrong, I want to be there. Brett wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes said it wouldn't matter. She'd made up her mind. He nodded, turned to Kendra. Get your team ready. Tomorrow night. We end this. The warehouse at Pier 9 smelled like rust and dead fish. Brett stood in the center of the empty space, a single overhead light casting shadows that stretched like accusing fingers across the concrete floor. It was 11:50 p.m., 10 minutes until Voss arrived. Brett wore a wire taped to his chest, so thin he could barely feel it, and an earpiece so small it was invisible. Kendra Hall's voice whispered in his ear, calm and professional. HRT is in position. 3 sniper teams, 2 breach teams. The moment Voss makes a move, we close the net. Just keep him talking. Copy, Brett murmured. He could feel his heart hammering, adrenaline singing in his veins. This was familiar territory, the moment before contact, when everything hung in balance, and the next 5 minutes would determine whether you lived or died. He'd done this 100 times in Iraq, Afghanistan, places without names. But those times, he'd had a team behind him. This time, he had a billionaire in a surveillance van and FBI agents who'd never heard his name until yesterday. It would have to be enough. Headlights swept across the warehouse entrance. A black sedan rolled in, slow and deliberate, engine purring. It stopped 20 feet from Brett, and Garrett Voss stepped out, alone. He wore a dark suit, hands empty, moving with the casual confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. He smiled when he saw Brett. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Where's my son? Brett demanded. Safe, for now. Voss walked closer, stopped just outside arm's reach. You bring the files? Brett pulled the flash drive from his pocket, held it up. Right here, everything you asked for. Voss's eyes narrowed. Toss it to me. Not until you prove Wyatt's alive, Brett said. Voss sighed, pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. He turned it so Brett could see. Video footage, time-stamped 20 minutes ago. Wyatt, sitting in a room Brett didn't recognize, looking scared, but unharmed. A man's voice off camera. Say hi to your dad, kid. Wyatt waved at the camera, tears on his cheeks, and Brett's chest constricted so tight he thought his ribs would crack. Voss pocketed the phone. Satisfied? Now give me the drive. Brett tossed it. Voss caught it one-handed, plugged it into a laptop he pulled from the car. His fingers moved across the keyboard, checking files, verifying contents. Brett watched his face, watched the moment Voss's expression shifted from confidence to suspicion to cold, murderous rage. This is empty. Yeah, Brett said. Funny how that works. Voss pulled a gun, aimed it at Brett's chest. You think this is a game? You think I won't kill you right here? Go ahead. Brett's voice was steady even though his pulse screamed. Kill me, and you never get those files. They're encrypted, hidden. And if I don't check in with the right person at the right time, they get uploaded to every news outlet, every congressional committee, every international court that would love to put you away. So pull that trigger, Voss. See what happens. Voss's jaw tightened. The gun didn't waver. Where's your son right now, Brett? You think I can't make that phone call? Have him bleeding out in the next 60 seconds? That footage was fake. Brett took a step forward, closing the distance. Wyatt's not with your people. He's somewhere you'll never find him, protected by people a hell of a lot more competent than Aegis contractors. You lost, Voss. It's over. Nothing's over until I say it's over, Voss said. His finger moved to the trigger, and Brett saw the calculation in his eyes. The moment a man decides killing someone is worth the consequences. Time slowed. Brett's hand moved toward the concealed pistol at his back. Voss's finger tightened. Then the warehouse exploded with light and sound. "Federal agents, drop the weapon!" Kendra Hall's voice, amplified through a megaphone, echoing off the walls. Red laser dots appeared on Voss's chest, a dozen of them, sniper teams from every angle. Breach teams poured through the doors, rifles up, shouting commands. Voss spun, trying to track threats, but there were too many. He fired once, wild, the bullet ricocheting off concrete. Return fire lit up the darkness. Voss went down, blood blooming on his shoulder, the gun clattering away. Brett dove behind a steel support beam, hands over his head, as federal agents swarmed the warehouse like a kicked hornet's nest. It was over in seconds. Voss on his stomach, hands cuffed, blood pooling beneath him, shouting threats that nobody was listening to. Kendra walked up to Brett, offered a hand to help him to his feet. "You okay?" "Yeah," Brett said, ears ringing, hands shaking with adrenaline come down. "Is he talking?" "Not yet." Kendra looked at Voss being dragged toward an ambulance by 2 agents. "But he will. Shoulder wound's not fatal. He'll live to stand trial. And with the files you've got, we'll bury him." Brett pulled out his phone, dialed Vivian. She answered immediately. "Brett, are you—" "I'm fine," he said. "It's done. Voss is in custody." "Where's Wyatt?" "Safe. Still at the estate. You want me to bring him to you?" "No." Brett's voice cracked. "I'm coming there. I need to see him. I need to know he's okay." "Then come. I'll have the plane ready." Brett hung up, turned to Kendra. "I need to go." "Not yet." Her voice was firm but not unkind. "We need your statement. The files. Full debrief. I know you want to see your son. But if we're going to make this stick, if we're going to take down Aegis for good, I need everything you've got." Brett looked at Voss being loaded into the ambulance, still shouting. The man who'd terrorized him for a decade, brought low by bad tactics and federal firepower. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt hollow. Wyatt was safe, but how long would that last? How long before another ghost from Brett's past came crawling out of the dark? He pulled the real flash drive from his boot, handed it to Kendra. "This is everything. Use it. Burn Aegis to the ground. And when you're done, I want witness protection for me and my son. New names. New lives. Somewhere Voss's friends can't find us." Kendra took the drive, tucked it into her jacket. "We'll take care of you. You have my word. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. 10 years ago, walking away from that kill order. And tonight. Not everyone would have had the guts." "Guts had nothing to do with it," Brett said. "I just wanted my son safe. That's what guts looks like." Kendra nodded toward the exit. "Go. See your kid. We'll handle the paperwork. But Brett, don't leave town until this is settled. We'll need you to testify." Brett walked out of the warehouse into the Seattle night. Rain was falling, cold and clean, washing the smell of gunpowder and fear from his skin. Vivian was waiting by her SUV, and when she saw him, she crossed the distance in 3 strides and pulled him into a hug. Brett stiffened, then let himself lean into it, let someone else hold him up for just a moment. "Thank you," he said into her shoulder, "for everything." "You don't thank someone for doing the right thing." Vivian pulled back, looked him in the eye. "But you're welcome anyway. Now let's get you to your son." The estate was massive, all wrought iron gates and manicured gardens. Security met them at the entrance, waved them through. The house was lit up like a castle. Vivian led him inside, through hallways lined with art, and finally to a sitting room where Wyatt was curled up on a couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching cartoons. The boy looked up when Brett walked in, and his face transformed. "Dad!" Wyatt launched himself off the couch, and Brett caught him, lifting him up, holding him so tight he thought he might break something. The boy was crying, and Brett realized he was too. Tears he'd been holding back for 3 days, pouring out in the safety of his son's arms. "I'm sorry," Brett whispered. "I'm so sorry, kiddo. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." "Are the bad guys gone?" Wyatt's voice was muffled against Brett's shoulder. "Yeah, they're gone. It's over." "Promise?" Wyatt asked. Brett set Wyatt down, crouched to his level, looked him dead in the eye. "I promise. Nobody's gonna hurt you. Not now. Not ever. I'm going to make sure of that." Wyatt nodded, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Can we go home now?" Brett glanced at Vivian, who was standing in the doorway, giving them space. "Not yet. We have to wait a little bit. Make sure everything's really safe. But soon. I promise." Wyatt seemed to accept that. He climbed back onto the couch, patted the cushion next to him. "Will you watch cartoons with me?" "Yeah," Brett said. "I'll watch cartoons with you." Brett sat down, pulled his son close, and for the first time in 3 days, let himself breathe. The weeks that followed were a blur of depositions, FBI interviews, and legal proceedings. Kendra Hall kept her word. Witness protection was arranged. New identities drafted. But first, there was the trial. Garrett Voss stood before a federal judge and pled not guilty to 17 counts. Brett testified for 6 hours, laying out everything he knew about Aegis Group. It was brutal, reliving those years, but necessary. The jury deliberated for 3 days and came back with guilty verdicts on 14 of 17 counts. Voss got 30 years in a federal supermax prison. No parole. It was over. Brett sat in the courtroom gallery when the sentence was read, Vivian beside him. He waited to feel relief, vindication, something. Instead, he felt empty. Voss going to prison didn't bring back the people Brett had killed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. One got through, shoved a microphone in his face. "Mr. Callahan, how do you feel now that Garrett Voss is going to prison?" Brett stopped, looked at the camera. Wyatt was watching this somewhere. Wyatt, who needed to believe his father was a hero. So Brett said what he was supposed to say. Justice was served today. That's all that matters. The months after the trial were quieter. Brett and Wyatt moved to Vermont under new names. Brett became Thomas Harper, carpenter and single father. Wyatt adjusted better than Brett expected, made friends at school, started sleeping through the night again without nightmares. The boy was resilient in ways that broke Brett's heart. Vivian visited once a month, always bringing gifts. Somewhere along the way, that's what they'd become. Friends. Not the kind forged in combat, but the kind built on shared trauma and mutual respect. One evening in late November, Brett was building a bookshelf when Vivian called. "Turn on the news. CNN now." The headline made his stomach drop. Aegis Group dissolved. Congressional investigation reveals decades of war crimes. The footage showed senators at a press conference, FBI agents leading handcuffed executives out of office buildings. At least 47 former employees were now facing charges. Brett sat down hard. 47 lives he'd helped destroy by coming forward. Brett's phone rang. Vivian. "Did I do the right thing?" Yes, her voice was firm, no hesitation. "Those people made choices, Brett. Same as you did. The difference is you chose to stop. They chose to keep going. Don't carry their guilt." "Feels like I should," Brett said. "That's called a conscience. It means you're human." Brett glanced toward the living room, where his son was sprawled on the floor, coloring. The picture he was working on was a house, simple and bright, with 2 stick figures standing in front. One tall, one small, both smiling. "He's good. Better than good. He's happy." "Then you did the right thing," Vivian said. That kid wouldn't be coloring if Voss had gotten his way. Brett hung up, walked into the living room, sat down next to Wyatt on the floor. The boy looked up, smiled. Want to color with me, Dad? Yeah. Brett picked up a crayon, started filling in the sky. Blue, bright and clear. No clouds, no storms on the horizon. Just sky, stretching forever. It wasn't real, not yet. But maybe it could be. The winter passed slowly, marked by snow and wood smoke, and the quiet routines of a life Brett was still learning to live. He built furniture, taught Wyatt to ice skate, went to parent-teacher conferences where he was just another dad. Vivian came for Christmas. She brought a tree, a real one, 8 feet tall, smelling like winter, and ornaments that probably cost more than Brett's truck. She helped Wyatt decorate while Brett cooked dinner, and for a few hours, it almost felt like they were a family. Not in the romantic sense. Brett wasn't ready for that. Might never be. But in the way that mattered. People who cared about each other, who showed up when it counted, who didn't let the past define the future. After Wyatt went to bed, Brett and Vivian sat by the fireplace, watching the flames dance. "I've been thinking," Vivian said, "about what comes next." "What do you mean?" Brett asked. "For you, for Wyatt. Eventually you're going to want a real life, a name you didn't borrow from the FBI, a job that's more than just cover." Brett stared into the fire. "I don't know if I get that. A real life, after everything I've done." "You saved my life," Vivian said. "You brought down a criminal organization. You're raising a good kid. That's not nothing, Brett." "Thomas," he corrected. "Thomas Harper. That's who I am now." Vivian smiled. "Thomas Harper, then. When the dust settles, when the FBI says you're clear to go public, I want to offer you a job. Head of security for Cross Industries. Legitimate work. Good pay. Benefits. College fund for Wyatt. You know how to protect people. Everyone talks about redemption like it's this grand, singular moment. It's not. It's 1,000 small choices every day to be better than you were. You're already doing that. I'm just offering you a place to keep doing it." Brett thought about it. A real job. A future. Something to build toward instead of just running from. It was terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." Vivian stood, stretched. "I should get going. Early flight tomorrow." Brett walked her to the door. She paused on the threshold, looked back at the house, the tree glowing in the window, the life Brett was trying to build from the ashes of who he used to be. "You're going to be okay, Thomas Harper. You and Wyatt both." "I hope so," Brett said. "I know so." Spring came to Vermont in slow waves. Brett, Thomas now, he was getting better at remembering, stood on the shore of the pond behind his house, watching Wyatt cast a fishing line into the water. The boy's form was better now, smooth and confident, nothing like the fumbling 8-year-old who'd been with him the day the jet went down. That felt like a lifetime ago. In some ways, it was. Brett had died that day, and Thomas Harper had been born in his place. Not a perfect man, not a clean one, but a man trying. And maybe that was enough. "Dad, I got one!" Wyatt's shout cut through Brett's reverie. The boy's rod was bent double, lines zinging off the reel. Brett jogged over, coached him through the fight. Keep the tip up, let him run, don't horse it. And after 5 minutes of battle, Wyatt hauled a 2-pound bass onto the bank. The kid was grinning so wide his face might split. "Did you see that?" "I saw it," Brett said. "That's a trophy fish, kiddo. Nice work." Wyatt crouched down, carefully removed the hook, held the fish in the water to let it recover. Brett had taught him that. Catch and release. Respect for the thing you're taking from. The bass flicked its tail and disappeared into the murky depths. Wyatt stood up, wiped his hands on his jeans. "Can we come back tomorrow?" "We can come back every day if you want," Brett said. "Really?" "Really." Brett ruffled his son's hair. "That's the nice thing about living here. No schedules, no rush. Just us and the pond." They packed up their gear, walked back to the house as the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky orange and purple and gold. Inside, Brett started dinner, while Wyatt did homework at the kitchen table. It was domestic, mundane, and absolutely perfect. The kind of life Brett had never thought he'd deserve. Halfway through chopping vegetables, his phone buzzed. A text from Kendra Hall. Trial's over. Witness protection officially closed. You're free to resume your real identity if you want, or keep the new one. Your call. Either way, you're clear. Good luck, Thomas, or Brett, whoever you decide to be. Brett stared at the message for a long time. Brett Callahan was a ghost, a name attached to crimes and missions he'd spent a decade trying to forget. Thomas Harper was a carpenter, a single father, a man with a clean slate. Which one was real? Which one did he want to be? He looked at Wyatt, bent over his math homework, tongue sticking out in concentration. The boy didn't know his father had ever been anyone other than the man sitting across from him. Maybe it was better that way. Maybe some truths didn't need to be told. Another text, this one from Vivian. Heard the news. Offer still stands. Head of security. Your call. No pressure. Brett typed back. I'll take the job, but I'm keeping the name. Thomas Harper. Fresh start. Vivian's response came immediately. Works for me. Welcome aboard, Thomas. We'll talk details next week. Dinner was spaghetti, nothing fancy, but Wyatt ate 3 helpings and declared it the best meal ever. After dishes, they watched a movie, something animated with talking animals that Brett couldn't follow, but Wyatt loved. The boy fell asleep halfway through, curled against Brett's side, and Brett carried him upstairs, tucked him into bed. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Wyatt sleep, thinking about the last year. The fear, the violence, the choices that had led them here. It had been hell, but they'd survived. More than survived. They'd come through it stronger, closer. More whole than Brett had any right to hope for. He went downstairs, stood at the window looking out at the pond. The surface was still, reflecting stars he couldn't name. Tomorrow, he'd call Vivian, start planning the move to California, figure out how to transition from hiding to living. It would be hard. There would be questions, curious looks. He'd have answers. Not the whole truth, but enough. The rest he'd keep buried, along with the man he used to be. A car pulled into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the house. Brett's hand moved toward the gun drawer, old instincts flaring, but he forced himself to stop. Relax, the danger was over. He opened the door and found Vivian standing on his porch, overnight bag in hand, smiling. Surprise. What are you doing here? Brett asked. Celebrating. You said yes to the job. That deserves champagne and terrible takeout. She held up a bag. I brought Chinese food. The good kind. Brett laughed. Couldn't help it. It's 10 p.m. And we've got a lot to plan, Vivian said. Job starts in 3 weeks. That's not much time to get you and Wyatt relocated, enrolled in school, set up in a house that doesn't leak when it rains. She pushed past him, set the bag on the kitchen counter, started unpacking containers. Brett watched her move through his kitchen like she owned it, and realized something had shifted between them. They weren't just allies anymore. They were friends. Real ones. The kind who showed up unannounced with Chinese food and life plans. You didn't have to come all the way out here. I wanted to. Vivian looked at him, expression softening. You saved my life, Thomas. I don't take that lightly. And I don't abandon people who matter. You matter. Wyatt matters. And I'm going to make sure you two have the life you deserve. Brett's throat tightened. He'd spent so long not deserving things that he'd forgotten what it felt like when someone believed otherwise. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Vivian grinned. Wait until you see the health insurance forms. Come on, let's eat. Then we'll figure out the logistics. They ate at the kitchen table, talking logistics and futures and possibilities. Vivian had it all mapped out. A house in Napa, a salary that would let Brett put Wyatt through college, benefits that included therapy. It was overwhelming, but Vivian waved off his protests. "I'm a billionaire, Thomas. This is pocket change." By midnight, they'd worked through most of the details. Vivian yawned. "I should find a hotel." "You can take the guest room," Brett said. "It's not fancy, but it's got a bed." "You sure?" Vivian asked. "I'm sure. Besides, Wyatt'll be thrilled to see you at breakfast." Vivian's expression softened. "That kid's something special. You did good with him, Thomas. Against all odds, you did really good." "I had help." Brett looked at her. "I wouldn't have made it without you." "We helped each other." Vivian stood, touched his shoulder. "That's what people do. Good night, Thomas Harper. Sleep well. You've earned it." Brett turned back to the window. The pond was still out there, holding its secrets. He thought about the day the jet went down, how saving one life had unraveled everything and forced him to become someone new. He'd been terrified, and in a way, it had destroyed him. Brett Callahan was gone. But Thomas Harper was here, standing in a kitchen that smelled like Chinese food, and hope, planning a future with his son and a friend who'd become family. It wasn't the life he'd imagined. It was better. He walked upstairs, checked on Wyatt one more time. Still sleeping, still safe, and then went to his own room. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges. Moving, new job, new city. The slow work of building a life that wasn't defined by running or hiding or fear. But tonight, he could rest. Tonight, he could close his eyes and know that his son was safe, that the ghosts were buried, and that the man he was becoming was someone he could live with. It wasn't redemption, not the kind you saw in movies, with swelling music and tearful apologies. It was quieter than that. Harder, but real. Brett climbed into bed, pulled the covers up, and let sleep take him. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't dream of the people he'd killed. He dreamed of the pond, the fishing line arcing through golden light, and Wyatt's laugh echoing across the water. He dreamed of beginnings,